As you look forward into 2025 with the possibility of some really great looking games, I found myself reflecting on 2024, not only as a year with some incredible releases, but also a year filled with some dumpster fire launches that give me a sense of disbelief. As gamers, I feel it's important for us to reflect on the past and to learn what good gaming actually looks like, as well as just laugh at some of the grossest releases that I've seen in the last year. But with so many games we have played and even had to put on the dreaded backlog, I crunched the numbers, pulled together the opinion of the crew, and came up with a definitive list of the best and most disappointing games of 2024. Which games do we think were the best? Which were Turbo S? Let's jump into it. Before we jump into the official list, I need to make sure I say this so I don't get shit thrown at me from all different directions. This is a list compiled between me and the crew based on the games we played this year. Sure, are there games that may have been amazing that have seen national appeal like Balatro that I personally have not played? Yes, but I'm not going to be a shill and throw those games on the list that I have not experienced myself. And to be honest with you, even between the crew members, we have completely varied opinions on what we consider to be the best games of the year. So let's just say it's about to get controversial. So you may or may not agree, but I encourage you to drop your top 5 games that released this last year in the comments below and see if we agree. So to start off the rip, first controversy, we have a tie. For the number 5th on my list of the best games of 2024, the first game is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Square Enix has been on my shit list for a while. Not because they make bad games, maybe other than Forspoken, but it's more that since they usually produce pretty damn good games, that they usually like to squeeze IPs like they're in a vice grip. Now, even if I hold a personal grudge for Square Enix for refusing to make a sequel for Kingdom Hearts 3, their handling of the Final Fantasy series has been top tier. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is the second of a trio of remakes of the legendary Final Fantasy game that came out decades ago. And similar to what we saw in the first installment, which included a massive open world, an expansion of the original story, and some excellent presentation, we also see more style and excellent music that really gives the franchise a much needed refresh. I mean, the variance in gameplay components, the combat system was fluid with different ways to experience each fight, and many ways to upgrade your character really pushed this title in the Game of the Year discussion. And most people still believe that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth had one of the biggest and highest chances to win Game of the Year, and we're heavily surprised that they lost out on nearly all these different accolades at the Game Awards this year. Hitting a Metascore of 92 is pretty damn good, especially with a year filled with other great titles. And on top of that, this game sets the stage for the final game of the trilogy, which will conclude the story, which I'm sure will be excellent. Now, if it was good, some may ask, why wasn't this game higher on the list? Well, at times, it felt like the game sort of dragged out. The open world had so much to do, even though traversing it at times felt like a drag. The side content was very enjoyable to play through, but the overall pacing of the story seemed slow, which caused people to criticize the decision of dividing the game into 3 separate parts. One of my larger concerns was that the original title had incorporated all aspects of the story into one game. But if you break up the story into 3 separate pieces, then your struggle is that you really need to find ways to expand content in an efficient way. So if you don't include viable story content to pull this off, then the game may lack some story development to keep people going. But even with that being the case, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth released as one of the best games of the year, with wide appeal and praise. Let's just hope Square Enix can actually release a Kingdom Hearts game now. Along with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, at my number 5 is Metaphor ReFantasia. Now, you may not know this, but I'm a beloved fan of the Persona series. Even though I got late to the fan club, I've been playing several games in the series from Persona 5, Persona 5 Royal, and Persona 3 Reload, and planning on playing some of the other games, but yeah, the backlog is pretty rough right now. So when Atlus had said that they're taking a break from Persona to make a brand new game with similar RPG turn-based mechanics, but set in a brand new fantasy world rather than just being in Tokyo like some of the other Persona games, I was a little nervous. But if you really want to know what Metaphor is like, it's basically a Persona game with similar fighting styles, a major emphasis on storytelling, and so much side content for you to do that it feels like the game is almost infinite. I love the fight-to-fight gameplay and the infinite feeling of archetypes that you can use to set your crew up to basically go on your own adventure. And I think what people forget, or at least not realize, is that since Atlus wanted to take a gamble on changing up their game, they literally created mechanics that were so good that it would surprise me if they don't actually use them in the next Persona title. But not only do we get an interesting story with fun gameplay, but the characters are just fantastic, and they just meld together so well. And sure, the dweebs are angry that you don't really get the chance to romance any of your allies like you used to do in literally every single Persona game. I mean, legit, both Persona 3 and 5, you can hook up with every character possible, then get caught and get your ass beaten by every trick in the game. But I guess Atlas did not want to fuel the goons' urges. The music and the art style are what really get me hooked with these games. I mean, I can listen to the Persona series music all day long, and when it comes to Metaphor, I kind of feel the same way. And they didn't disappoint at all when you think about the trend of how Persona music always has been. The music was very different in how the overall feel was, and it had a lot more vocals, and it had this sort of Final Fantasy vibe to it. It was very different from what we used to see with Persona, but it was still excellent nonetheless. But even with my love for Metaphor being clear and present, I can definitely say that it doesn't hit the top game for a few reasons. If you've never played a Persona game before, there is a chance you might not like Metaphor, mainly because it's a turn-based RPG game that is hella long with so much to do. And by all means, I believe the game deserved Game of the Year this past year with how much I loved it, and the overall performance being amazing. But I can also recognize that this game hits a certain itch that may not be enjoyed by everybody. I wouldn't call it niche, but it definitely has a certain flavor that may not be enjoyed by everybody. Sure, the small issues of balancing could be true, but the game landed with a 90 meta score, amazing sales, and a lot of popularity that will most definitely drive Persona 6 to be released pretty soon. Just make sure next time you can romance everybody, because dweebs might get angry. At my number 4, I'm going with Astrobot. Now, with the most recent Game of the Year winner hitting my list may not be surprising, but the big question is, why is it so beloved? First off, who doesn't love an adorable robot platformer? Platformers are usually dominated by our boy Mario, so when we get to see a new gaming face hit the genre in stride, we sort of accept them with open arms. And sometimes we wish we could see more of them, still hoping we can get a Banjo-Kazooie game at some point, but I really don't think it's going to happen. One can only hope. But Astrobot has a simple story with so much style and charm that really does attract so many gamers. I mean, when you look at PlayStation and their exclusives, how many cartoonish faces do you really have as part of your gaming icon? It's not Ellie, or Aloy, or Kratos, but here comes Captain Astra. So we actually get a game that has a cool art style that mirrors Mario Galaxy, a solid story of rebuilding your crew, and so many worlds to explore. You basically had all the boxes of a great platformer. Astrobot nails the fundamentals of platforming with smooth and simple mechanics: jump, attack, run, but don't mistake simplicity for a lack of depth. The game throws a solid lineup of power-ups, including boxing gloves, jetpacks, and even time manipulation, making each level feel like a fresh challenge. With 12 power-ups in total, 4 returning from Astro's Playroom, and 8 brand new ones, it delivers that Mario power-up magic in a uniquely PlayStation way. And thanks to the DualSense adaptive triggers and motion controls, you don't just play Astrobot. You feel every punch, jump, and glide like haptic feedback was the real MVP all along. Story-wise, Astrobot keeps it short and sweet. Recover the broken parts of your PS5 spaceship and rescue your buddies. It's not exactly a Final Fantasy level of epic storytelling, but it doesn't really have to be. The real star is the level design. With 80 levels across 6 galaxies, the game offers a constant evolving adventure that ranges from lush, nature-filled landscapes to chaotic, neon-lit casinos. One minute you're dodging slot machine hazards like you're in Sonic's Casino Night Zone. The next you're gliding through a peaceful paradise like you're playing Donkey Kong Country. The vibrant visuals and the engaging story track amplify the experience, making every stage feel distinct and immersive. At its core, Astrobot is pure platforming joy, blending clever mechanics, responsive controls, and imaginative levels. It may not have a deep, lore-heavy narrative, but it delivers a colorful, fun, and creative experience that keeps you engaged from start to finish. Even though Astrobot took home the coveted Game of the Year title, it doesn't quite make the cut as my best game of 2024 for a few reasons. The biggest issue is its lack of extra sauce, that special, indescribable magic that separates a good platformer from an all-time great. Sure, it's a love letter to PlayStation fans, packed with nostalgic cameos of legendary characters, but there's only 5 such levels. It's like booting up a new Smash Bros. Game with the promise of all these crazy characters to unlock, but then once you start out the game with only 5 characters, you can only play as those 5 until you get a brand new DLC. That's just bullshit. Then there's the replayability, or lack thereof. The main game plus some side content clocks in around 10 to 12 hours. That's shorter than a weekend binge watching of a favorite Netflix show. And it feels a little bit light compared to games like Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart or Mario Odyssey. While Astrobot does feature collectibles like puzzle pieces and coins that unlock cosmetics, The absence of challenging post-game content like speedruns or brutal one-hit challenges makes revisiting levels feel as exciting as reheating day-old fries. To be fair, there are whispers of DLCs in the works that may introduce more replayable content, but as it stands, Astrobot is more of a fun weekend adventure than a game you can sink weeks into. It's still a fantastic platformer that's charming and well designed and packed with PlayStation love, but it just doesn't hit the best of the year level for me. At number 3, we jump into the surprise game of the year, Helldivers 2. Now, a lot of people might put this game as probably the best or at least number 2 just because it sort of brings back the hope and how indie devs can produce real content that is better than most live service games currently in the gaming market. Helldivers 2 took the world by storm with its charm, appeal to most gamers, and in a world where most multiplayer games are just sweaty PvP games that challenge you to go into ranked and lose sleep over missing 5 games in a row, this game brings us back to the old days of just joining up with teammates, having fun, and what I love about it is it spreads democracy. With so many worlds to venture to and liberate, many different weapons with unique traits, and the fact you can actually unlock them, I just believe there's so much you can do in this game, and it just keeps bringing you back for more. The Game Master does bring variability in providing orders for us to prioritize with certain mission objectives pretty often, and this basically simulates how live service games should be in this modern era. Sure, there are some annoying practices that force you to pay real money to gain access to certain passes to earn this type of content, but most often you can actually earn back money by buying into these passes. It actually encourages you to grind through them. Especially with the additions of the new Illuminate faction, it sort of feels like we're entering into a democracy-fueled world with just so much liberty to dispense. Now, even with this game being fun with a whole lot to do, the game has some flaws. There really isn't a narrative, and it does lack that flair or the variability of gameplay that some games above it have. There is a limitation on the mission variability, which is a downer, especially since the game has been out for a while now, and there really isn't much changes since day one. And with the game having so much in it and being demanding on your console or your PC, I sort of get annoyed that there's still so many issues with graphics and stability, which seem like they have never been fixed or touched upon. The game is so fun to play, and I love me some democracy, but the flaws do limit its long-term success. Next up at number 2 is probably the next controversy, but I'm gonna stick with it. Elden Ring Shadows of the Erdtree. Red alert, red alert! Marsman, that's not a game, it's a DLC! Yeah, I know. And I also do believe that this game should not be nominated for Game of the Year at the Game Awards. But as an experience, it was a fantastic. I mean, if you remember the release of Elden Ring and the attention it had when it first dropped, it was unmatched. I mean, I made a video on how legendary this game was. Whether it was the combat, the crazy story, the epic boss fights, Elden Ring hit that Souls-like feel to a whole new level. But even with Elden Ring winning Game of the Year, the question would be, how do you match this game, or better yet, how do you even put it in the same conversation as the original title? What would the new game's focus be? And Shadow of the Erdtree was tasked with this, and they landed a pretty damn good expansion. The DLC dives into a completely new area to explore with new villains, bosses, and a crap ton of weapons to learn and explore with. It expanded on the lore from the main game and actually gave us some impressive music and epic moments. I mean, I'm gonna be real. One of the boss fights between the music and the presentation itself is considered one of the most badass moments I've experienced in gaming altogether. It's never easy to try to mirror the glory or excitement from something that was so beloved as Elden Ring. So of course, there's going to be critiques. As much as there were some new additions of lore that were really cool, there's still so much content that was never answered. What about the other gods we didn't get to fight? What about the possible Godric the Gold return? Did they fully answer the questions of why Miquella was doing anything he was saying? So for experienced gamers that dove into the story, we just sat there really wanting to have answers to these questions. And it just feels like a missed opportunity. And as much as I respect the setup that the game has with being connected to the world and essentially nerfing your character so that you have to really find it difficult, this sort of limits the amount of players who are good enough to grind to get to the DLC. Like, there are people out there that still have yet to play the DLC because it's so hard to get to that point. You have to actually be good and get to the portal to get you to the next dimension. And then once you finally get to that dimension, you're then nerfed again. So let's just say you want to go and play this with your boys, you might not even be able to get there because defeating Moog is super impossible. And I know I'm not going to sit here and defend all those herbs saying that Elden Ring is too hard and you need to have a difficulty rating, but at the same time, you can critique the idea that if someone wants to experience a DLC, you don't have the ability to just load into this new story content. You have to earn that, and that might be really painful for some people. Now, overall, Shadow of the Erdtree is probably the best DLC I played since the Witcher 3 expansions, or the Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty update, and that's an accomplishment within itself. And I would recommend anyone to jump back into the world and play it for yourself to see if you can get there. And even personally, I would not call this the game of the year. And even as a crew, we felt that this game had impacted us more overall as a scope of content, and we believe that it stands on a leg of its own, and it would win by a landslide if there was an award for the best DLC expansion of the year, and that's a fact. Our number one release of 2024, based on the crew's votes, is Marvel Rivals. And I'm sure I'll hear the collective outrage or anger, but I'm gonna be real with you. This game deserves to be recognized for hitting an overall package multiplayer experience. When you think about the hero shooter genre, and just how many attempts there have been over the years since release of Overwatch, more than 10 hero shooters have dropped since 2016, and most have failed miserably. Something like Apex Legends, which is a hero battle royale, did succeed, but roughly 90% of those other hero shooters nosedived directly into the dumpster. So you can understand my hesitation when playing Marvel Rivals in the thought of maybe this might fail instantly, but it didn't. It not only didn't fail, but it literally took the world by storm. Being a free-to-play game definitely helped them get people to the door, but literally took the formula that made Overwatch fun and just replicated it with a new coat of paint. The gameplay mirrors Overwatch, where certain heroes have abilities that are different based on their builds. Whether they are duelists, tanks, or strategists, each have their strengths and weaknesses overall. Duelists can vary between being frontline tank killers like the Punisher or Scarlet Witch that can drain the life out of anyone and just stack kills. Or you can equip backline duelists like Spider-Man that have the job of being annoying assholes that sneak behind the enemy team and kill healers and just cause mayhem. Tanks can act as defensive players that take damage for their squad or cut through teams to break momentum. And strategists are the biggest amoeba because some are strictly healers only, while others are a mix of duelists that have some really great defensive ults. And sure, this does sound very similar to Overwatch and their methodology, but yeah, that's kind of how it works. There's no need to change it. I mean, only an idiot would take something that worked for so long and drastically change basic gameplay aspects, the speed of the game, or even the size of the teams and expect it to actually work. I mean, only a complete moron would do that. And sure, the modes are nearly identical to the original Overwatch game, but the maps and heroes are incredibly unique and even give different vibes altogether. Some maps are complete ass, like fighting domination on Asgard literally makes me question my life decisions, but there are some really solid maps like Midtown or Tokyo from the Spider-Verse. I mean, they are great additions with so many different ways to play. But what takes the cake as to why I really enjoy this game is the heroes and characters we get to pick. Even when comparing the launch of both Overwatch and Marvel Rivals, technically Overwatch started with 21 heroes at the launch compared to Marvel Rivals 18. But Marvel Rivals devs had declared that every month their plan is to release a minimum of 2 heroes into the field, so that by the numbers wise, we'll be adding 24 heroes by the end of the first year of the game if they actually stick to it, which can be outrageous if it is true. We already had seen some heroes released so far and leaks of many others in the pipeline, which is great if any of this is actually going to be consistent. Marvel Rivals feels like a hero shooter that a lot of people did not think was going to be good, but since they have a connection to the vast Marvel fandom, along with some really great mechanics, it really did land with little to no problems. Sure, the criticisms of the game are pretty much the same with most hero shooters. Some heroes are way too OP. I mean, I went off on stream before about characters like Dragon Fist that would beat the stuffing out of me. There seems to be zero ability to counter him, which is pretty dumb. But even with these characters, the game doesn't feel like you are stuck. Sure, there are times where you play ranked and you feel like you're just stuck sucking eggs when you play against a team that's good and actually knows how to play the game together, but I feel like that kind of happens with most ranked games. There's somewhat of a learning curve to a certain extent based on the level of rank you are. I mean, when you first start playing the game, you just focus on getting kills and just learning how to enjoy yourself. But the more you play, you start to realize that the game is way more complex, and the team builds really are essential to actually succeed. And it sort of feels like this became more of a team game than Overwatch at times, where even if one player dominates with 40 eliminations, if the team doesn't hit their marks when they're supposed to, you can lose an objective game, which is just straight up heartbreaking. The bottom line is Marvel Rivals, from launch to even the plans that they have in the future, feels like a complete package, and the fact that this was a surprise that they landed with no hiccups and their live service model has so much potential gives me hope that this game actually has a chance to match the legend of Overwatch. And if you forgot, Overwatch won Game of the Year. Does that mean that Marvel Rivals has the same odds? Possibly, but it really depends on if they stick to their plan. Let's hope that they do. Before we head to the most disappointing games of 2024, What are your top 5 games released in 2024? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you liked the video so far, drop a thumbs up and subscribe to support the channel. Now let's jump back into the video. Even though 2024 had a lot of great games, it also filled us with some titles that literally were either overhyped from the start, that failed, or games that nearly everyone knew were going to crap their pants. And for me, number 5 of my most disappointing games of 2024 has to be Madden 25. Now I'm sure you may be saying, Mars, it's Madden. What thought in your mind made you think that this game was actually going to be good? And to be honest, I have been one of those people that have always said that Madden games are complete money grabs, and for the most part, they have proven me correct every single year. So all of a sudden, when EA announces that they're returning to the legendary college football games, I thought to myself, there's a chance that maybe Madden can improve themselves to a level that is actually successful. And when college football released, I played the game quite a bit, felt like the gameplay was an upgrade from the Madden titles, and overall was a pretty damn good experience. It got to the point where I actually purchased the game fully after I dropped my review. So when Madden was close to its release date, I thought to myself, damn, if Madden can do anything close to what NCAA football did, then maybe we might see the best Madden game in years. So when Madden released, it basically ruined all hopes that this franchise can get back on track. Sure, the gameplay feels better than last year's garbage, and they did add some aspects like training camps and the NFL Combine, but the game is a literal cheap-ass version of NCAA football, and that is head and shoulders worse than its sibling in the same genre that was released 2 months later. Even if the game functioned normally, it still was ass. But the game was plagued with constant bugs, game-breaking freezes, and the presentation actually looks on par with aspects of PS3 era of graphics. I mean, what makes matters worse is that when you look at the amount of money that is made between the Ultimate Team and the overall sales in units, it's literally disgusting thinking that EA can take even a portion of that investment and actually make the game better, and it doesn't feel like a money grab. But instead, they refuse and just constantly just do the dumb thing and do nothing at all. Like when you look at the additions of new content that they made into this game, it sounds like, wow, they really put a lot of work in. But in reality, these are features that were made from Madden's decades ago, back when I was still shitting my diaper. So it's like giving them a pat on the ass for something they should have done years ago. The user score of Madden on Metacritic is around a 2.8, which is abysmal. And I think it's a combination between the lack of any new real additions to the base game of Madden that we're all used to seeing, but the fact that we just saw NCAA football actually land relatively okay, and Madden still sucks ass when it's literally your moneymaker. That's what makes this worse. That's the embarrassing thing. Now that we're talking about money grabs and scams, there's no better scam than the Star Wars Battlefront collection that's dropping in at my number 4. I think we have to remember the hype behind this game. It was promised that we were going to get a remastered version of the good Star Wars Battlefront games. No, not that garbage, the real classic Battlefront game. But the series was at its peak. Promise from the devs that yes, it may not resemble the newer graphics, but it will have an increased FPS, and multiplayer will be built in so you can play in large-scale combat online. Well, do you know what we got? Nothing. Just broken trash where servers didn't work, the game was riddled with bugs, and people were forced to pay full price. I mean, that's either going to be called a COD Modern Warfare 3 game or a scam. And I don't see Soap's goofy ass around here, so I'm going to call it a scam. And the only thing that saved this game from being an absolute number 1 on my list is because it was from a small studio. It's a game that wasn't expected to be a game changer for the gaming industry. It was one of those opportunities that seemed to fail, and that's what hurts the most. Eventually, the studio added some fixes and made somewhat stable at that point, but honestly, I don't think anyone really plays this game anymore, and it's a shame that it flopped so hard. If only people just weren't greedy and actually gave us what they promised. And when I jump to my number 3, it falls on Concord. One of the biggest flops of the year by far. Much about Concord's development and eventual release has been somewhat hidden from the public. But for a while, a lot of people, whether they are fans or insiders over at PlayStation, believe that Concord would be the future of Sony's multiplayer space, mirroring a hero shooter similar to what we saw with Overwatch. It was expected that this game would be a big hit, especially with hero shooters being pretty consistent theme or trend in gaming right now. But even as we got closer to release, it felt like this game was either hidden or didn't exist because Sony barely even hyped it up or had some sort of marketing. And over the years, we've seen that Sony has usually liked to market their games that they have a lot of confidence in. But then all of a sudden we were in the dark for so long as we got closer to release, it sort of gave a bad vibe. So when it finally came out, people sort of understood why it was relatively hidden. The gameplay had a plethora of heroes, which is cool, but each hero was pretty much bland. But it sort of felt like you AI generated heroes, and that's sort of what Concord got. I mean, hero shooters are really difficult to pull off, especially when you really don't give a damn about the heroes. For instance, when you look at Overwatch, before the game even released, Blizzard went on an entire tour of releasing these mini shorts, giving a sense of lore for each character that we're going to be playing. So fans had a feeling about the background of the character and what they really care about and some story about them, making them seem interesting. I mean, even when we look at Marvel Rivals, the easy trick for them is that they are basically using an already established IP of Marvel, where nearly everyone knows at least one or two heroes in the damn universe. But at the same time, there are heroes that I have no idea who they are. So why is it that Marvel Rivals doesn't get shit on for not developing these characters? Well, they make them good enough in the game so it kind of intrigues people to go and investigate who the hell these people even are. So for Concord, the problem was not only are these heroes bland, but it really wasn't fun to play as them. The game as a whole was flawed. The maps are giant, but everyone runs like they have a giant massive pull up their ass. So it takes me 5 minutes to get back into the battlefield, then I die, then I have to restart the process, and by the time I have a few altercations with enemies, the game's over, resulting in me getting 9 kills before the time runs out, because it takes me forever to get back into the fight. Could Concord survive in this era? Of course, but they really needed to revamp their characters, fix the fight-to-fight gameplay, and maybe don't charge full price for a game in a market where nearly every single hero shooter is free to play. That might actually work, but unfortunately they failed to see this, and that's why the game servers turned off after a month. They missed a good opportunity. So when continuing discussion on disappointments and missed opportunities, it only makes sense to jump into my number 2, which is X-Defiant. Oh, what could have been? X-Defiant had originally been in talks over at Ubisoft as a possible rival to Call of Duty in the FPS realm, where most people were calling it the COD killer. Others felt that they needed to see it to believe it. When they first dropped the beta in June of 2023, I was pleasantly surprised. The gameplay felt fluid. The factions that you had were different, and I love the fact that they're pulling different groups from games that we played over the years and gave each one abilities and ults that are different. It was great balance between Call of Duty and Overwatch, which did give me a feeling of uniqueness, which is much needed in the shooter genre altogether. Most often games are trying to copy each other, and to be honest, that was part of X-Defiant's downfall. All of a sudden, when people were wondering when the hell this game's ever going to release, Ubisoft was silent. Months passed and all we heard about this game was that it was going to come out sooner than later, and the hitch was that it wasn't ready to release because of bugs or issues that they had with the game. But how is that possible? It literally was playable on most consoles with little server issues during the beta. But then 6 months later, we still have nothing to show for it. Then all of a sudden, we kept hearing rumors that X-Defiant devs were holding off on the release because, one, they didn't want to release it alongside COD, or even worse, they're trying to mirror COD mechanics so it could be similar. No, you dumbass. You don't want to be like COD. That's the problem. The more the game is like COD, the more we're gonna hate it. The reason Battlefield was loved until the devs discovered crack was that it took a different approach to war games. COD was a sweaty 6v6 version, while Battlefield was the more fun, war-like vehicle combat. So when you come up with a unique hero shooter game, the less COD, the better. So when the game finally released, I was somewhat happy in the state that it was. But I started to notice something. The hit registration was super off. I know I'm a god gamer and all, but there are times where I make mistakes and I miss my shot. But then all of a sudden, I started to notice that my easy sniper shots were somewhat not hitting. I knew I hit that guy in the forehead. I know that bitch is dead. But then all of a sudden, it happened so often because the hit registration became a major problem. Then I found out that they really tried to mirror Call of Duty because their spawns or their maps were complete garbage. There are times where I would spawn in front of an enemy team and get blasted. Yep, there's a COD clone I was afraid of. And as months passed, we barely got updates. Guns were barely added to the game, and most of the issues of the title were never really resolved, resulting in a majority of the fan base to leave. Then recently, Ubisoft made the announcement that by June 3rd of this year, X-Defiant servers will be turned off. So the game will die with only 1 year under its belt. This could have been a great game. It could have been a viable game in the shooter genre, but their lack of understanding that they should have been their own title and try not to copy somebody else led them to be a forgettable game that will fade away like a wet fart. And number 1 of my most disappointing games of 2024 goes to the legendary skid mark Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. I mean, where the hell do I start? I mean, that would be a pretty good spot. This game has the potential to be one of the biggest dumpster fires of all time. Not because the sales of this game were bad, not because there were so many bugs, it's mainly because the expectations and the balls of the devs to basically call out the fans and say, that this is our game and screw your feelings. Makes me sick to my stomach. I mean, they use the Arkham universe and literally take a giant crap on everything. They kill off the entire Justice League in completely dumb ways while trying to elevate the Suicide Squad. But here's the problem. The entire closing of all these characters and how they went out is a spit in the face of their legacies. I mean, this is supposed to be the Justice League, and each character that dies has some Marvel-esque joke thrown at them like we're part of a comedy skit, where in reality, each character dying should be a solemn yet good moment to send off the character in the right way. I feel like Wonder Woman had a good death, while characters like Batman, which is the best character in the game and voiced by the legendary OG Kevin Conroy, had his character's face shot off while basically felt like I was getting kneed in the nutsack. Then the devs turned around months later after they realized that the game was completely trash and that it sucked ass, turned around and retconned the entire thing, saying that they're actually clones. They're clones. No, sorry. It's a separate universe. So the Batman from the Arkham series is still alive, actually. Do you think I'm dumb or something? I'd have more respect if you just said and just made a brand new game and start over rather than pull off this shit. I've heard of retconning bad decisions, but this is just embarrassing. Yeah, the game's mechanics are repetitive, the live service model is completely garbage, the story is complete turbo ass, but all of this pales in comparison to the treatment of this franchise. The expectations of the game is really what put the nail in the coffin. Rocksteady has always been a reliable game team, and this title was so bad that it put a permanent blemish on the studio that I honestly don't know if they could ever recover from. I mean, maybe we'll find out when they make a Suicide Squad 2 and they kill off the Justice League again, but this time they won't shoot off Batman's face with a gun, they'll just kill him with cringe. So with 2024 in the books, I can say that it was a pretty damn good year for gaming. Some really awesome games that really pushed the boundaries of stories, gameplay, and just being fun, while others lowered our standards to a new degree, which still surprises me to this day. Let's hope that no devs make games so bad that it makes my list for next year, because I can only take so much disappointment. But what games were your favorite and most hated for 2024? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And make sure you hit that thumbs up and subscribe if you like this type of content. I dropped a review of Marvel Rivals as well as a few other games on my list on my channel, but go check it out in the end screen. Until next time, this is Marsman signing off. Game on.